Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Room Schoolhouse. We are continuing along with the Black History, the American Heroes series. And this is stuff, if you want to follow along, you can go to WallBuilders.com. You can get the PDFs or you can get the printed version. In fact, just get the PDFs and print it yourself. It's super easy. Today we are going to highlight Blanche, Kelso, Bruce. And if you don't know him, that would make you a normal person because most people don't know. Oh, by the way, we're at the WallBuilders facility today, and on my left is
Danielle.
And on my right,
Elijah.
We are going to dive into this story together and hopefully give you some new information about genuinely an American hero, someone that should be celebrated that unfortunately too few people have heard his story. So we'll back up. All right, so Danielle, walk us through early life Blanche, Kelso, Bruce.
Sure. So like many of our heroes, he was born into slavery. And what's something to consider is this is a story of redemption and how he was able to overcome great oppression in the peak time of oppression. So he was born into slavery in Virginia, but he was moved to Missouri, and the slave master moved him several times. But he was able to work as a field hand, he studied printing, and he worked in a factory. And his brother, who was with him, reflected on this time in their childhood and said, "We enjoyed life in the factories very much and were well fed." Blanche was given the same education as the slave owner's son.
Now let's stop there, because that's a really big deal. Yeah. So often when we hear or think about the depiction of slavery, it's obviously slavery is an evil institution, but so often we think of this very abusive situation where, right, somebody's getting beat every day, and we do know in so many situations in southern plantations there was not education. So to have a master, again, slavery, awful, evil, terrible institution, to have a master who educated the slave the same that he did his son, right, that's a pretty unique situation. And you mentioned that even Blanche's brother talked about how they were growing up, that they were well taken care of. In fact, he said that they were fed well, they got to work in some of these facilities. So their situation was a little bit different.
And he was learning printing, which is a huge trade of that time. And it definitely comes in as a major feature later in his life.
Yeah, because ultimately the family ends up escaping. He ends up escaping slavery. And once he escapes slavery, he starts teaching at a school, which it makes sense if you were a printer that you were familiar with words, right? Probably know some grammar, some English.
So he did go to Kansas, which was an anti-slavery state, and he left a very pro-slavery state of Missouri. And what's interesting about that is when he did go to Kansas, he had this background knowledge in printing and words and everything, and he actually started teaching a school there, and he furthered his education by learning under a minister. So then, after the Civil War was ended.
So he wasn't able to join the Union Army as a soldier, but he decided that although I can't serve my country in that capacity, I'm going to go back to, after Civil War, of course, the slave state of Missouri, and bring all of that new education that I learned in Kansas and bring that to the poor black children of Missouri that didn't have an education. And I think that's so incredible how even though opportunity would have been way greater for him back in Kansas, he chose to give of his time and efforts in education in starting the first black school in Missouri.
Well, when we look at Blanche, Kelso, Bruce, he's not even the first black U.S. senator, but he's the first black man to serve a full term, all 6 years in the U.S. Senate. And the reason that he would have been chosen is because he was already a leader in the state of Missouri even before that moment.
So that's what I was going to bring up. 2 points to clarify. Number one, the Republican Party was founded as an anti-slavery party. Right. I don't know if we mentioned that. So that's huge, and that's why they had so much of the support. But he also served as other political positions where he was elected, and some of those positions included tax collector, sheriff, election supervisor of elections.
So the point is, like, he was already known in the community. Right. They recognized who this guy was. And so then when there's an open seat, and also this is something too that we think of U.S. senators running for election. This is back in the day when you didn't really run the same way because the state legislature would choose who the senator was going to be. And so you're talking about all of these state elected officials in the legislative body. They said this guy would be really good to represent our state in the U.S. Senate, because at that time, senators were there to defend the state. Absolutely. To defend the right of the state, like kind of a novel concept, the 10th Amendment thought, defending the rights of states. But that's what U.S. senators used to do. And so he was chosen to go in that position. Not only that, I think this is, to me, one of the more impressive things is as he served in the U.S. Senate, and we can get into some details on another conversation about what all he did in the Senate, some of the major battles he had against some Democrats in the Senate. But during his last year as a senator, there was a presidential election, the election that actually leads to James A. Garfield being elected president. During that whole election cycle, the Republican Party, when they meet together and they're going to select who the presidential candidate is going to be and maybe even who they're going to nominate for vice president, Blanche Kelso Bruce was the first black man to ever be nominated for vice president from any major political party, this being the Republican Party. And he was nominated with another significant political individual of the day.
Absolutely. And that gentleman's name was James G. Blaine. He was the Speaker of the House.
So y'all are telling me that the first person of color elected as a VP candidate.
Well, nominated.
Nominated. Was not Kamala Harris?
I know, it's there are a lot of jokes in that one. We're gonna let that go, right? But it really, this is the silly thing in modern culture where they're making these claims about how this is the first time a black person's done this, the first time a person of color has done this, and the reality is historically, man, they're off by sometimes hundreds of years in the claims they make.
It's a great example of that.
And this is a great example of that, where also worth noting when James Garfield wins the presidential election. He had been a congressman before that and actually served in Congress at the same time that Blanche Kelso Bruce was in the Senate. They knew each other. And James Garfield actually nominates Blanche Kelso Bruce to be part of the federal government and puts him in kind of a unique position.
It was an extremely unique position. Specifically, he was nominated to be the Registrar for the United States Treasury Department. In that position, he would handle a lot of the public debts of the United States, but specifically had to ascribe his signature to various currencies. He's only one of 3 individuals to have his signature on 2 separate series of currency, one under President Garfield and the second under William McKinley.
Which also means he served in the government for after being senator. He served a long time under the next several presidents. And Danielle, we actually talked off camera about this, that it's worth noting, like, why would he be put in charge of money? Because people recognize something about him.
Right. So he had a very strict financial integrity about him. So he was a very successful businessman, and he actually owned a plantation, which after he retired from politics, he ran many successful businesses, and he had his plantation still.
Okay, so as we're looking at Blanche Kelso Bruce, there's so much more to the story than we're going to cover in this short few minutes together. You can go to WallBuilders.com. You can find out way more about Blanche Kelso Bruce. You certainly can download this biography. There's some footnotes in it. There's links on our website to find out more information. But this is somebody, as we're talking about the first black man to serve a full term in the U.S. Senate, that's a big deal, right? That this Republican senator and serving under multiple presidents, having his signature on 2 different series of currency, this guy's a big deal. He's somebody that should be known, remembered, and celebrated. Blanche Kelso Bruce. To find out more, just tune in next time to the next episode of Room Schoolhouse. We'll see you next time.